The silence didn't break all at once. It cracked. It started with a voice, sharp, controlled, cutting through the soft hum of engines and the low murmur of first-class conversations. I said, "Get up. Now." Heads turned slowly, like a wave rolling through the cabin. Champagne glasses paused mid-air. A man in a navy suit stopped flipping his Wall Street Journal. A woman in oversized sunglasses lowered them just enough to see. At the center of it all stood Captain Jonathan Reed, 56, tall, silver hair cut clean at the edges. His uniform pressed so sharply it looked like it could slice skin. 4 gold stripes on his shoulders, gleaming under the cabin lights. He wasn't asking. He was ordering. And his finger, steady, rigid, was pointed directly at the woman in seat 1A. She didn't move. Dr. Emily Carter sat still, one hand resting on the armrest, the other loosely holding a bottle of sparkling water. The condensation rolled slowly down the glass, catching the light. Her hoodie, charcoal grey, soft, understated, framed her face like a shadow. To most people, she looked invisible. To Reed, she looked wrong. "You're in the wrong seat," he said, louder now. "Not just for her. For everyone. This section is reserved for passengers who actually belong here." A few passengers shifted. Someone coughed. No one spoke. Emily lifted her eyes. Calm, tired, focused. "Excuse me," she said, her voice low, steady. No tremble. No fear. Reed took a step closer. The polished leather of his shoes pressed into the carpet with a dull, final sound. "I don't have time for this," he snapped. "That seat costs $20,000. Either you move to the back, or you get off my aircraft." My aircraft. He let the words hang. Ownership. Authority. Control. Across the aisle, a young man in a tailored blazer leaned forward, whispering to the woman beside him. "Jesus, this is gonna get ugly." She didn't answer. Her phone was already out, camera hovering just below eye level. "Recording." Emily noticed. Of course she did. She noticed everything. The way the flight attendant near the galley froze mid-step, unsure whether to intervene. The way the older couple in row 2 exchanged glances, confused, uncomfortable, but not surprised. The way a businessman further back smirked, like he had seen this play out before. Different faces. Same story. She exhaled slowly. 3 days without real sleep. 72 hours in a glass-walled boardroom. Lawyers, contracts, numbers that could shift entire markets. And now this. "I paid for this seat," Emily said. Not louder. Just clearer. Reed laughed, short, sharp, disbelieving. "You?" he said, looking her up and down like he was scanning for a joke he hadn't caught yet. "You paid for a diamond suite?" A few quiet chuckles rippled through the cabin. Not loud, not proud, just enough. Emily felt it. Not as pain, as confirmation. Reed leaned in, lowering his voice, but not enough. "Listen carefully," he said. "We have a real VIP boarding in 10 minutes. You are in his seat. So let's not make this more embarrassing than it already is. Real fee. IP." Emily's fingers tightened slightly around the bottle. There it was. Not just about money. About who looks like they deserve it. Behind Reed, a flight attendant, Lily Adams, 27, new enough to still care, shifted her weight. Her smile had disappeared. Her eyes flicked between Reed and Emily. "Captain," she said quietly. "The manifest shows I know what the manifest shows." Reed cut in, not even turning around. "And I also know when the system makes mistakes." Mistakes, he said it like a diagnosis, like she was a glitch. Emily tilted her head slightly, studying him now. Not the uniform, not the voice, the man. The certainty in his posture, the way he filled the space like it belonged to him. The way he didn't ask questions, he declared answers. Power, she thought. The dangerous kind. "On what grounds are you asking me to move?" she asked. The question landed heavier than it sounded. Reed's jaw tightened. "On the grounds that I am the captain," he said, each word deliberate. "And I decide who sits where." There it was again. Not policy, not rules. Him. A man in row 2 muttered under his breath. "That's not how that works." But he didn't say it loud enough to matter. Emily sat back, just slightly, enough to show she wasn't intimidated, enough to make Reed step forward again. "Last chance," he said. "You either walk to the back, or I call Port Authority and have you removed." The word removed hung in the air like a threat everyone understood. A woman across the aisle shook her head slowly, whispering, "Why is she even arguing?" "Just go." "Because it's not about the seat," Emily thought. "It never is." She looked around, really looked this time, at the eyes watching her. Some curious, some judgmental, some already convinced. Does she belong here? The question wasn't spoken. It didn't have to be. Emily reached into her pocket. Slow, deliberate. Reed's body tensed instantly. "What are you doing?" he snapped. "My boarding pass," she said. She handed it to him. He took it with 2 fingers, like it might stain him. Held it up, turned it slightly under the light, then scoffed. "Thermal print," he said. "Manual issue, gate override," he handed it back. Exactly what I thought. Emily didn't take it right away. She let it hang there between them for a second. Then she took it. Carefully, like it mattered. "I assure you," she said, "there is no mistake." Reed straightened. His voice changed now, louder, sharper. "For the audience, ladies and gentlemen," he said, turning slightly, projecting confidence, authority, control. "We are resolving a seating discrepancy to ensure that our premium cabin is reserved for those who meet our standards." Standards? The word echoed. Clean, polished, dangerous. Emily felt something shift. Not in the cabin, in herself. The exhaustion burned away, replaced by something colder, clearer. She could end this right now. One call, one name, one truth. But then what? A scene. Apologies. Damage control. And Reed would learn nothing. He would do it again. To someone else. In another seat. On another day. Emily stood up. Slowly. The cabin leaned in. She picked up her worn leather bag. Slung it over her shoulder. Then she looked at Reed. Really looked this time. Not with anger. with certainty. "You're making a mistake, Captain Reed," she said. Soft. Deadly. He smiled. Confident. Certain. "The only mistake," he said, "was letting you on this plane." Emily nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. Then she stepped into the aisle. "I'll take the seat in the back," she said. A ripple of relief moved through the cabin. Tension releasing. Order restored. At least on the surface. As she walked past him, she paused. Just long enough. Close enough that only he could hear her. "Remember this moment?" she said quietly. "You're going to wish you had." Then she kept walking. Down the long, narrow aisle, past the watching eyes, past the whispered judgments, past the illusion of who belonged where. Behind her, Jonathan Reed adjusted his jacket, straightened his shoulders, and smiled. He thought he had just put someone in their place. He had no idea. He had just stepped out of his own. Rain hammered against the aircraft like a steady drum, each drop streaking across the oval windows in silver lines that blurred the runway lights into something distant and unreal. Inside the cabin, the temperature was perfect, the lighting soft, the air scented faintly with citrus and polished leather. It was the kind of controlled luxury designed to make powerful people feel even more powerful. Emily Carter didn't look back. She moved down the aisle with measured steps, her shoulders relaxed, her breathing even. But her eyes were awake now, fully awake, taking everything in. Row by row, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. First class had been quiet, insulated, almost sacred. Business class was different, louder, less curated. Conversations resumed as she passed, but not quite at full volume. People watched her from the corners of their eyes, some openly, some pretending not to. A man in his late 60s, thick glasses, Midwest accent, leaned toward his wife. "That's her," he whispered. "The one from up front." His wife frowned. "What happened?" "Didn't belong," he said simply, like that explained everything. Emily heard him. She didn't react. Further down, a young consultant in a slim grey suit paused mid-email, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. He studied her face for a moment, trying to place something he couldn't quite define. Not recognition, something else. Composure. It unsettled him. Emily kept walking. The aisle narrowed. The seats tightened. The air changed. Warmer. Denser. Human. By the time she reached economy, the illusion was gone completely. Seat 42B, middle seat. Exactly as promised. To her left, a man in his 70s was halfway through a tuna sandwich, the smell thick and immediate. His shirt was wrinkled, his hands slightly unsteady, but his eyes were kind. To her right, a young mother bounced a crying infant against her shoulder, her face drawn with exhaustion, hair pulled back in a loose, failing knot. Emily paused for half a second. Then she sat. The seat pressed in from both sides. Plastic, tight angles. No space to negotiate. The man with the sandwich shifted, elbow brushing against her arm. Sorry, he muttered, mouth still half full. "They keep making these seats smaller every year." Emily allowed herself a small nod. It feels that way. He looked at her again. Really looked this time. You came from up front, didn't you? She met his eyes. A beat. I did. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. Yeah, figured. They don't usually send people back here unless something went sideways. Sideways? Emily leaned back as far as the seat allowed, which wasn't far. That's one way to put it, she said. The baby cried louder. The mother whispered something under her breath, her voice cracking just slightly. No one offered help. No one complained. This was normal here. Emily reached into her bag and pulled out her laptop. Old model. Scratched casing. Nothing about it suggested power. She opened it. The screen lit her face in a soft blue glow. Around her, people settled back into their own small worlds. Headphones, phones, silence. But Emily was not here to disappear. She connected to the onboard Wi-Fi, the signal weak, delayed, overpriced. She entered her credentials. A pause, then access. The interface wasn't public. It wasn't meant for passengers. It was internal. Deep system architecture, crew logs, maintenance reports, real-time data. The skeleton key. 3 days ago, during due diligence, she had insisted on it. Quietly, thoroughly. Now she used it. Her fingers moved faster. Captain Jonathan Reed. The name appeared instantly. Age, 56. Rank, Senior Captain. Tenure, 28 years. Performance, technically exceptional. HR notes. She clicked. A list unfolded. 3 formal complaints, all dismissed. Language, personality conflict. Pattern, assertive leadership style. Recommendation, no action required. Emily stared at the screen. Personality conflict. She almost smiled. Corporate language had a way of laundering truth. Bullying became assertiveness. Intimidation became leadership. She scrolled further. Fuel logs, route efficiency, crew turnover. Patterns began to emerge. Small things, easy to ignore individually, impossible to ignore together. Ma'am? She looked up. The man beside her held out a crumpled napkin. You dropped this? She glanced down. A receipt had slipped from her bag. Thank you. He shrugged. Name's Walter, he said. Retired. Used to run a hardware store out in Ohio. Nothing fancy. Emily nodded. Emily. Walter smiled. Well, Emily, if you ever want to experience real luxury, you should try one of these sandwiches. He lifted the half-eaten tuna with a kind of pride. $5 at the airport. Beats anything they serve up front. Emily looked at it. At him. At the sincerity. I'll keep that in mind. He laughed, pleased. Across the aisle, a teenager angled his phone slightly, pretending to scroll but clearly recording. The lens caught everything. Her hoodie, her seat, the contrast. Emily noticed. She always noticed. At the front of the plane, a different kind of performance was unfolding. Ryan Caldwell had taken over seat 1A like it was a throne. Shoes off, feet up, one arm draped lazily over the side. Hey, he snapped, not looking up. This champagne's warm. Lily Adams stood beside him, posture straight, smile tight. I'm sorry, sir. I can bring you another glass. I didn't ask. Ask for another glass, Ryan cut in. I asked for cold champagne. His voice carried. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably. Lily hesitated. "We have a limited—" "Then figure it out," he said, finally looking at her. His eyes were sharp, entitled. "That's your job, right?" She swallowed. "Yes, sir." Behind her, Captain Reed watched, not intervening, assessing, then approving. "Make sure he gets what he needs," Reed said quietly as Lily passed. "He's important." Important. The word echoed differently here. Back in row 42, Emily's screen refreshed. Crew satisfaction metrics declining. Maintenance delays increasing. Cost cuts everywhere. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. Not from fatigue, from clarity. This wasn't just one man. This was a system, built slowly, protected carefully, rotting quietly. "You okay there?" Walter asked, watching her face. Emily opened her eyes. "I'm fine." He nodded, unconvinced but polite enough not to push. The plane door closed with a heavy, final sound. A signal. No turning back. The intercom crackled. Captain Reed's voice filled the cabin, smooth, confident, practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the brief delay. We've resolved a minor seating issue to ensure the comfort of our premium guests. We'll be departing shortly." A few passengers nodded. Satisfied, reassured. Emily listened. Every word, every tone. Comfort of our premium guests. She looked around her, at the cramped seats, the tired faces, the crying baby. Walter carefully folding his sandwich wrapper so it wouldn't make a mess. Premium. She almost laughed. Instead, she typed one more command. A message. Short. Precise. To Chief Legal Officer. Subject. Flight Skylux 9002. Body. Observe. Do not intervene. Record everything. She hit send, closed the laptop. The engines began to hum louder, building toward motion. Walter leaned back, sighing. "Well," he said, "let's see if they can still fly the thing as good as they used to." Emily turned her head slightly, looking toward the front of the plane. Her voice was soft. "They can," she said. Then a beat. "But we'll see who should be flying it." Up front, Jonathan Reed adjusted his cap, unaware that the storm outside the aircraft was nothing compared to the one now quietly taking shape inside it. The plane hadn't even reached cruising altitude when the first crack in control appeared. It wasn't loud at first, just a raised voice, then a sharper one. Then the unmistakable sound of glass striking something harder than it was meant to. In row 42, Emily's eyes opened before her head moved. She had been sitting still, hands folded loosely in her lap, breathing slow, controlled. But the second that sound traveled down the length of the aircraft, something in her shifted. Instinct. Not corporate, not calculated. Human. Across the aisle, the teenager stopped pretending to scroll. His phone lifted higher now, camera steady, hungry. Walter paused mid-chew, his brow furrowing as he turned toward the front. "That don't sound right," he muttered. It wasn't. The curtain separating economy from premium economy swayed slightly, disturbed by movement on the other side. A flight attendant rushed past, her steps quick, uneven. Another followed, whispering into a hand-held intercom, her voice too low to make out, but urgent enough to matter. The baby in row 43 started crying again. Louder this time. Sharper. The kind of cry that reacts to tension before understanding it. Emily stood. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just decisively. "Ma'am, you need to remain seated," a passing attendant said, reaching out instinctively, but Emily was already moving. "I heard something break," Emily said, her tone calm, but it carried weight. Not a request. Not quite a challenge. The attendant hesitated. That was enough. Emily stepped into the aisle and moved forward. The air changed as she crossed into premium economy. Cooler, quieter. But underneath it, something else. A ripple of unease that hadn't settled yet. A man in a navy pullover leaned into the aisle. "What's going on up there?" he asked no one in particular. No one answered. Emily kept moving. Through the galley, into business class. Now the whispers were louder. People were turned fully in their seats, craning their necks. A woman clutched her wine glass a little tighter. A man in seat 5D shook his head slowly, already forming an opinion without knowing the facts. Emily pushed past the final curtain. First class. The illusion of perfection had shattered. Red wine soaked into the pale carpet like a spreading wound. Broken glass glinted under the overhead lights. A half-empty bottle lay on its side, still rolling slightly with the subtle movements of the aircraft. And in the center of it all stood Ryan Caldwell, unsteady, breathing hard. One hand gripping the side of seat 1A as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. "You stupid," he started, his voice thick, slurred, then cut off as he stumbled forward half a step. Lily Adams was backed against the galley wall, her uniform stained deep red, her hands shaking as she tried to steady herself. Her face was pale, eyes wide, the kind of shock that doesn't process until later. Captain Jonathan Reed stood between them. But not how he should have. Not facing Ryan. Facing Lily. "Clean yourself up," Reed snapped, his voice tight, controlled, but there was panic underneath it. "Go to the galley, now!" Lily blinked, confused. He grabbed me. I said, go!" Reed cut her off, sharper now. Ryan laughed. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was wet, ugly, empty. "She touched me," he slurred, pointing a finger that didn't quite land where he aimed it. "Tried to cut me off, like I'm some kind of kid." Reed turned to him instantly, tone shifting like a switch had been flipped. "No one is saying that, Ryan. It was a misunderstanding. We'll take care of it. Take care of it." Emily felt something cold settle into place. Not surprise. Confirmation. She stepped forward. "He's intoxicated," she said. Her voice didn't need to be loud. It cut clean through the space. And he just assaulted a crew member. Reed spun around. The moment he saw her, the color in his face changed. Not fear. Not yet. Anger. "You," he said, the word heavy with everything he had decided about her earlier. "I told you to stay in your seat." Emily didn't stop walking. She stepped over the broken glass without hesitation, her sneakers picking up a faint smear of red as she moved closer to Lily. "Are you okay?" she asked. Lily nodded too quickly, her voice caught somewhere behind her teeth. She couldn't form the words yet. She's fine, Reed snapped. You are interfering with a flight crew during an active situation. That is a federal offense. Emily turned her head slowly. Looked at him. Really looked. The situation, she said, her tone dropping, sharpening, is that you have an intoxicated passenger who is a safety risk, and instead of restraining him, you're protecting him. Ryan let out another laugh. Who is this? He asked, squinting at Emily, like she was something he couldn't quite focus on. Cleaning crew? The words hung there, heavy, ugly. Emily didn't react. Sit down, Ryan, she said instead, her voice calm, controlled, absolute. For a split second, something flickered across his face. Not recognition. Resistance? Then he stepped forward. Too close. You don't tell me what to do? He said, breath thick with alcohol. Do you know who I am? Emily didn't move. Yes, she said. You're about to commit a felony. He laughed again. Then he reached out. A shove. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to be a mistake. Emily moved before the contact fully landed. A small shift, a precise angle. Her hand came up, redirecting his arm just enough to break the force, not escalate it. His own momentum carried him forward, off balance. Ryan stumbled, his foot caught on the edge of the seat, and suddenly he wasn't standing anymore. He dropped back into the seat 1A with a heavy, awkward thud, air rushing out of him in a surprised grunt. Silence. Real silence this time. Reed's control snapped. That's it, he barked, voice rising, cracking under pressure. I am averting this aircraft. We are landing immediately. The word divert hit the room like a shockwave. Passengers shifted. A woman gasped quietly. Someone in the back stood halfway out of their seat before thinking better of it. And you, Reed continued, pointing at Emily, his hand no longer steady. You are under arrest. Assaulting a passenger. Interfering with flight operations. I will make sure you never fly again. Emily looked at the finger, then at him, then at Lily, still shaking, then at Ryan, now trying to gather himself, his confidence leaking out through the cracks of reality finally catching up. The pieces aligned. Fast. If he diverted the plane, hundreds of thousands of dollars lost, 300 passengers delayed, a ripple effect across routes, schedules, crews, all for ego, not safety. She made the decision. Now. You're going to divert the aircraft, Emily said slowly, each word deliberate. Because you can't manage one drunk passenger. I don't answer to you, Reed shot back. I am the final authority on this aircraft. Authority. The word echoed. Emily reached into her hoodie pocket. Reed's eyes widened instantly. Don't move, he snapped. Drop whatever you're reaching for. Emily didn't stop. Her fingers closed around something small. Solid. She pulled it out. A black leather wallet. She opened it. Inside, a titanium card caught the light, cold and unmistakable. But she didn't hand it over. Not yet. She held it. Between them. And for the first time since this began, the room didn't just feel tense. It felt like it was about to change. Completely. The card didn't look like much at first glance. No flashing badge, No official seal screaming authority. Just a clean slab of titanium. Matte black, edges precise, weight unmistakable even from a distance. But the way Emily held it changed everything. Not defensive, not hesitant. Certain. "Drop it," Reed snapped again, louder now, his voice cracking at the edges. "I said drop it!" Passengers were standing now. Not fully, not openly, but enough. Leaning into aisles, phones raised higher, breaths held tighter. The camera lenses caught the light. Emily didn't move. "I'm not dropping anything," she said. Her voice cut clean through the noise. No rush, no anger, just control. She flipped the wallet open fully this time, angling it just enough for Reed to see. "My name is Emily Carter," Reed scoffed instinctively. "I don't care if I'm the chief executive officer of Carter Capital." The words landed, but not yet fully understood. A few passengers exchanged looks. Someone whispered, "Carter Capital?" Like they had heard it somewhere, but couldn't place it. Emily didn't pause. 72 hours ago, she continued, stepping closer now, closing the space Reed had once controlled, Carter Capital finalized the acquisition of Skylux Airways. Silence. Not the polite kind. The kind that drains sound out of a room. Reed blinked. Once. Twice his brain tried to process it, reject it, reframe it into something that made sense inside his world. "You're lying," he said. But it came out weaker than he intended. Emily held up the card. The gold-etched Skylux logo caught the cabin light. Sharp, undeniable. "I own this aircraft," she said. "I own that seat. I own the fuel in the wings. And I own your contract." The words didn't rise. They dropped. Heavy. Final. Behind Reed, Lily stopped breathing entirely. Her hands froze mid-motion, the cloth still clutched uselessly in her fingers. Her eyes moved from the card to Emily's face, searching for any crack in the confidence. There wasn't one. Ryan shifted in his seat, the fog of alcohol lifting just enough for fear to slip in. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. For the first time since he boarded, he said nothing. Reed's hand lowered slowly. The authority drained out of it. "Check the manifest," Emily said, her tone colder now, sharper. "Look at the status code next to my name." Reed didn't want to. That was clear. His body resisted before his mind caught up. But something deeper, training, instinct, survival, pushed him. He reached for the nearest tablet. His fingers weren't steady anymore. He pulled up the passenger list. Scrolled. Too fast. Missed it. Scrolled back. There. Row 42B. Carter, Emily. Status 01. Owner. The word sat there. Simple. Unavoidable. The tablet slipped from his grip. Hit the floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the cabin. No one moved. No one spoke. Emily stepped closer again. Now she was the one occupying space. Reed stood in it. Trapped. "You didn't know," she said. "Not a question. A statement. And that," she continued, her eyes locking onto his, "is exactly the problem." Reed swallowed. Hard. He started, but the words didn't come. Not the right ones. Not fast enough. Emily turned slightly. "First officer," she called out, her voice carrying effortlessly toward the cockpit. A young man appeared in the doorway. Daniel Brooks, 34, alert, tense. He had been listening the entire time, his face pale but focused. "Yes, ma'am," he said. The shift in tone was immediate. Respect, not forced, instinctive. Emily held his gaze. "Is this aircraft capable of continuing to London safely under your command?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Yes, ma'am." "Good," she said. Then she turned back to Reed. "You are relieved of duty." The sentence landed like a verdict. No drama, no emphasis, just final. Reed shook his head slowly, like he could physically reject reality. "You can't do that," he said, his voice thin now, stretched tight. "I'm the pilot in command." Emily's expression didn't change. "Under Company Bylaw Section 14, Article 3, she said, "in the event of gross negligence or compromised judgment, the senior corporate officer present has the authority to remove command." She let the words settle, then added, quieter, sharper. "You just threatened to divert a transatlantic flight because your ego was challenged." A murmur moved through the cabin. Low, unsteady. Passengers were no longer watching for entertainment. They were watching consequences unfold. Ryan shifted again, his hands now gripping the armrests, knuckles pale. "Hey," he said, trying to regain control, but his voice didn't carry the same weight anymore. "This is getting out of hand." Emily turned her head slightly. "Just enough." "Mr. Caldwell," she said. His name landed harder than anything else had. Recognition. Exposure. "You're going to remain seated," she continued. "You are not going to speak. You are not going to move." Her eyes sharpened. "If you do, I will have law enforcement waiting at the gate for assault on a crew member." Ryan nodded. Fast. Too fast. The shift was complete. From untouchable to contained in seconds. Emily looked back at Reed. He hadn't moved. Not really. Just standing there, uniform still perfect, authority gone. "Take seat 42B, she said. The words hit him harder than everything before. A visible reaction this time. His jaw tightened, his shoulders stiffened. "That's a middle seat," he said, almost reflexively. Emily held his gaze. "I'm aware." A pause. Long enough for the meaning to sink in. Long enough for every person in that cabin to understand exactly what was happening. Reed didn't argue again. He couldn't. He stepped back. Slowly. The first step felt unnatural, like his body was forgetting how to move without command behind it. Passengers parted slightly as he moved into the aisle. Phones followed him. Recording, capturing, the walk, the fall. Emily watched him go, not with satisfaction, with purpose. Then she turned to Lily. The tension softened, just a fraction. "Are you hurt?" she asked. Lily shook her head, though her hands were still trembling. "No, I didn't know what to do." Emily nodded once. "You did more than most would," she said. Lily's eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. "Not here. Not now." Emily stepped past her. toward seat 1A. The wine still stained the floor, the glass still scattered, the illusion still broken. She didn't sit. Not yet. She stood there for a moment, looking at the space. Then she turned, her voice calm again, controlled. "Cabin crew," she said. "Prepare for departure. We're already behind schedule." Movement resumed. Not normal, not yet. But moving. The system was shifting, from the ground up. And somewhere in the back of the plane, in a narrow middle seat between strangers, Jonathan Reed was about to understand exactly what that felt like. The walk felt longer than the aircraft itself. Jonathan Reed stepped into the aisle, and for the first time in nearly 30 years, he didn't control it. No one moved for him out of respect. They moved because they wanted to see. Phones lifted higher, screens glowing, tiny red recording lights blinking like quiet witnesses. He kept his eyes forward, didn't look left, didn't look right, but he felt everything, the weight of it. The shift. Row 1 passed, then row 2. A man in a tailored suit leaned slightly into the aisle, his lips curling just enough to register something between disbelief and satisfaction. A woman across from him didn't even hide it. She held her phone up openly now, tracking Reed's movement like a documentary unfolding in real time. Reed's jaw tightened. He wanted to say something, to reassert, to correct. But the words didn't exist anymore. They had no place here. By the time he reached business class, the air had changed. No champagne, no curated silence. Just people. Watching. Judging. A younger man in seat 4C whispered to his neighbor, not nearly quiet enough. "That's the captain, right?" "Was," the neighbor replied. Reed heard it. Every syllable. It landed deeper than he expected. He kept walking. His shoes, once symbols of precision and authority, now sounded too loud against the carpet. Each step felt heavier than the last, like gravity had quietly increased just for him. In the galley, a flight attendant stepped aside quickly, her posture stiff, her eyes fixed on something beyond him. She didn't greet him, didn't acknowledge him. She just moved. He passed through the curtain into premium economy. The space narrowed, the lighting harsher. A man pulled his headphones off, watching Reed with open curiosity. A woman clutched her bag slightly tighter, as if proximity to a fallen authority carried its own risk. Reed kept moving. The further back he went, the more the aircraft revealed itself. Not the polished version he had curated in his mind. The real one. The one he never walked through unless he had to. Economy. Row after row of tight seats, tired faces, quiet endurance. He reached row 42 and stopped. Seat B, middle, exactly where he had sent her. Walter looked up first. His sandwich paused halfway to his mouth, eyes narrowing slightly as he took in the uniform, the posture, the confusion. "Well," he said slowly, "you look like you took a wrong turn, son." Reed didn't respond. He just stared at the seat. It looked smaller now, or maybe he was seeing it clearly for the first time. To his right, the young mother shifted the baby to her other shoulder, barely glancing at him. "You sitting or just standing there?" she asked, her voice tired, edged with the kind of irritation that comes from long days and no patience left. Reed hesitated. Just a fraction. Then he turned, lowered himself into the seat. It didn't fit. Not comfortably. His shoulders pressed into both armrests at once. His knees hit the seat in front of him instantly. No space to adjust. No angle to negotiate. The armrests stayed down. They always did. Walter shifted slightly, his elbow brushing Reed's side without apology this time. "Told you," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Reed exhaled, slow, controlled. But it didn't help. The air was different back here, thicker, warmer. He could smell everything. Food wrappers, fabric, people. It pressed in, from all sides. He looked forward. The back of the seat in front of him was inches from his face. The plastic tray table rattled slightly with the vibration of the engines, a dull, constant reminder that he was no longer above any of this. He adjusted his legs. There was nowhere to put them. To his right, the baby started crying again. Sharp. Relentless. The mother sighed, bouncing the child gently. "Shh, I know," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. Reed closed his eyes. For a moment. Just a moment. But it wasn't enough to block anything out. The noise, the pressure, the reality. Overhead, the seatbelt sign chimed. The aircraft began to move. Pushback. He knew the sound instinctively. The rhythm. The sequence. But this time, he wasn't part of it. He wasn't calling commands. He wasn't monitoring systems. He was sitting, waiting, like everyone else. Up front, Daniel Brooks sat in the captain's seat. His hands rested on the controls, steady, focused. The instruments glowed softly around him, familiar and precise. He ran through the checklist, voice calm, controlled, every step deliberate. Behind him, Emily stood just inside the cockpit door, watching. Not interfering, not directing, just observing. The system in motion. The system she now owned. "Pushback complete," Daniel said. "Roger," came the response from ground control. Emily studied his posture, the way he listened, the way he checked, then rechecked, not out of doubt, but discipline. No ego, just execution. She nodded once, more to herself than to him. Back in row 42, Reed felt the shift in engine tone as the aircraft began to taxi. His body reacted automatically, a lifetime of muscle memory. He wanted to lean forward, to adjust, to anticipate, but there was nothing to do. The man in front of him reclined his seat. Slowly, completely. The space disappeared. The tray table pressed into Reed's knees, then into his thighs. He inhaled sharply. Walter glanced sideways. "Yeah," he said, chewing thoughtfully. "That part never gets easier." Reed didn't answer. He couldn't. The pressure built, not physical. Something else. A realization. Unavoidable now. This was what he had dismissed, minimized, ignored. For years, not because he didn't know, because he didn't care. The aircraft paused, then turned, then aligned. The engines roared, full power. Reed felt it in his chest, in his bones. The acceleration pushed him back into the seat, tighter, harder. For a brief second, something familiar flickered. The feeling of flight, of control. But it passed, quickly, replaced by something else. Distance. He wasn't flying this aircraft. He was being carried by it. The wheels lifted, the ground fell away. And for the first time in his career, Jonathan Reed had no control over where he was going. Cruise altitude settled in like a fragile truce. The engine softened into a steady hum, the kind that usually lulled passengers into sleep and gave crew a rhythm to work with. Lights dimmed slightly. Conversations returned in fragments. The illusion of normalcy tried to stitch itself back together. It didn't hold. Up front, Ryan Caldwell sat strapped into seat 1A, the heavy sash belt crossing his chest like a quiet warning. His hands rested on his thighs, fingers twitching occasionally, the last remnants of alcohol fighting against the rising clarity of fear. He hadn't spoken in 20 minutes, not since Emily told him to stay silent. He kept his eyes forward, avoiding everyone, even Lily. Especially Lily. Across from him, Emily finally took a seat. Not in 1A. 1F. She angled the chair slightly, facing him without making it obvious. Her posture relaxed, one leg crossed over the other, hands resting loosely as if this were a conversation she had all the time. But her eyes never left him. "Do you know how much fuel this aircraft burns per hour?" she asked. Ryan blinked. The question didn't make sense in his world. "What?" he said, his voice rough. 7 to 12 tons, Emily answered calmly. Every hour, every minute we're in the air costs thousands of dollars. Ryan swallowed. She leaned forward slightly. "I don't run a business where ego decides outcomes," she said. "I run one where consequences do." He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable now in a way that had nothing to do with the belt. "My father," he started. Emily lifted a finger. "Just enough." He stopped. "Your father," she said, "is a smart man, which is why he's going to be very careful about what happens next." Ryan's jaw tightened. "He sits on the transportation committee," he said, trying to rebuild something that had already collapsed. "You can't just I can," Emily said. 2 words. Flat. Final. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and held it loosely in her hand. "I have documentation," she continued. "Statements, witnesses. And more importantly, I have timing." She let that sit. "By the time we land, you will have 2 options. Apologize sincerely to the crew member you assaulted, or explain your behavior to law enforcement." Ryan stared at her. The fight was still there, but it was losing. "You're bluffing," he said, but it sounded more like hope than belief. Emily tilted her head slightly. "You want to test that?" He didn't answer. He leaned back instead, the air leaving him in a slow, quiet exhale. Across the cabin, Lily moved carefully through the aisle, her movements more controlled now, but the tension still visible in her shoulders. She avoided looking directly at Ryan, avoided looking at Reed's empty seat. She stopped briefly near Emily. "Ma'am," she said softly, "would you like anything?" Emily looked up at her. "Water." Simple. "Just water," she said. Lily nodded. Her hands were steadier now. Not because the situation was over, because something had shifted. For the first time since she started this job, someone had stepped in. Not to calm things down, to correct them. Back in row 42, the calm felt different. Heavier. Jonathan Reed sat rigid, his hands resting on his thighs, fingers pressing into the fabric of his uniform pants, like he was trying to anchor himself to something familiar. There was nothing. Walter had finished his sandwich, the wrapper folded neatly in his lap. He glanced sideways at Reed again. "You always sit this quiet?" he asked. Reed didn't respond. Walter shrugged. "Suit yourself." To Reed's right, the mother finally got the baby to sleep. She leaned back, closing her eyes for just a moment, her head tilting slightly to the side. Reed watched her. Not intentionally. It just happened. The way exhaustion overtook her. The way relief came in small, fragile pieces. He had never noticed that before. Not really. The seatbelt sign flickered off. A soft chime. Cabin service resumed. Flight attendants moved through the aisle, offering drinks, snacks, small comforts designed to make the hours pass faster. Reed watched them. Different now. He saw the strain, the speed, the constant adjustment between politeness and pressure. One attendant paused near row 42. "Drinks?" she asked. Her voice was neutral, professional. Reed looked up. For a second, he almost said something automatic, something he had said 1,000 times, but the words didn't fit it here. "Water," he said instead. She nodded. No recognition, no special tone, just another passenger. She handed him a plastic cup. Not glass, not crystal. Plastic. He took it. His fingers tightened slightly around the rim. The texture alone was enough to remind him where he was. Across the aisle, the teenager leaned forward again, phone angled just right. "You were the captain, right?" he asked, not bothering to hide the curiosity. Reed didn't answer. The kid smiled faintly. "Crazy," he said. "Didn't think I'd ever see that." Reed looked away. The engines droned steadily. The aircraft moved through smooth air. For now. Up front, Daniel adjusted the controls slightly, his eyes scanning the instruments with quiet confidence. He communicated with air traffic control, his voice even, measured. "Flight level 350, he confirmed. "Roger that," came the response. Emily stood just behind him again, watching, not interfering. The system, working, without Reed. She turned slightly, looking back through the cabin, all the way down, to row 42, where a man who had once believed he was untouchable now sat in a middle seat, holding a plastic cup, trying to understand how everything had shifted so completely. Emily's expression didn't change. Not satisfaction, not anger. Something else. Resolution. Because this wasn't finished. Not yet. And somewhere deep in the structure of the company she now controlled, she could already feel the fault lines beginning to move. What had happened on this flight wasn't an exception. It was a symptom, and symptoms, if ignored, became systems. The plane moved forward, steady, silent, carrying everyone inside it toward a destination none of them would arrive at the same way they had boarded. The first jolt came without warning, No gradual build, no gentle warning from the sky. Just a sudden drop. The aircraft fell a few feet in an instant, the kind of movement that snaps people out of whatever illusion they were holding on to. Gasps filled the cabin. A glass rattled off a tray somewhere in business class. Overhead bins trembled, the dull clatter echoing like distant gunfire. The baby in row 43 woke instantly, crying sharp and loud, cutting through everything. Jonathan Reed's eyes opened wide. Instinct hit before thought. His hands shot forward, gripping the back of the seat in front of him, muscles tightening automatically, body reacting as if he were still in command. "Turbulence," Walter muttered, grabbing the armrest, his voice steady, but his knuckles pale. The plane dropped again. Harder. A woman screamed from somewhere behind. Reed's chest tightened. He knew this. Clear air turbulence. Sudden, invisible, unpredictable, but manageable. Always manageable. If you knew what you were doing. He unbuckled his seatbelt. The click sounded louder than it should have. "Sir, you need to stay seated," a flight attendant called from the aisle, gripping the overhead rail, her voice strained but controlled. Reed was already halfway up. "I need to get to the cockpit," he said, his voice sharp, urgent, slipping back into command without permission. The plane lurched again. He steadied himself, one hand reaching instinctively for support, his body already calculating, already correcting for movement. "They don't have the experience," he added, louder now. "The first officer, he's not ready for this kind of... Sit down!" The voice cut through everything. Not loud, not panicked, controlled, absolute. Reed turned. Emily stood in the aisle a few rows ahead, one hand gripping the overhead rail, her posture balanced, steady, despite the violent motion of the aircraft. Her hair had come loose slightly from the movement, a few strands framing her face, but her eyes were locked on him, unshaken. The plane dropped again. A sharper movement this time. Someone cried out. A bag shifted in an overhead bin with a heavy thud. Reed braced himself. "You don't understand," he said, his voice pushing against the rising tension, trying to reclaim something slipping away. "This is severe chop. If he overcorrects, he won't." Emily didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Because unlike you," she continued, "he listens to his instruments." The words landed clean. Precise. Reed stared at her. For a second, the turbulence disappeared. Not physically, but in his mind, replaced by something else. Doubt. The plane shook again, hard. Reed grabbed the seat back, his balance slipping slightly before he caught himself. "I have to help," he said. But it sounded weaker now, less like authority and more like need. Emily stepped closer. Careful. Controlled. "You are a passenger," she said. The sentence didn't rise. It settled. Heavy. Final. "Sit down." Another drop. Reed's body reacted, instinct pulling him toward control, toward the cockpit, toward the place where he knew how to exist. But something held him. Not physically. Something else. The realization. He wasn't needed. Not here. Not now. Slowly, he lowered himself back into the seat. The belt clicked into place. The aircraft shuddered once more. Then it leveled. Gradually. The violent motion softened into a low, persistent vibration. The screams faded. The baby's cries softened into small, uneven whimpers. The cabin breathed again. Not fully, but enough. A moment passed. Then the intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel's voice came through, steady, composed. "We've encountered a pocket of clear air turbulence. We've adjusted our altitude and expect smoother conditions ahead. Thank you for your patience." His tone didn't waver. Not once. Reed listened. Every word, every inflection. No panic, no overcorrection. Just control. The right kind. He leaned back slowly, his hands still gripping the armrests, though the need had passed. Walter let out a low whistle. "Well," he said, exhaling. "That was something." Reed didn't respond. He couldn't, because for the first time in his career, he had felt the plane move without him, and it hadn't needed him. Across the aisle, the teenager lowered his phone slightly, his eyes wide. "That was insane," he whispered, half to himself, half to whoever might be listening. No one answered. They were all still processing. Up front, Emily remained standing for a moment longer, her hand still on the rail, her gaze steady as she listened to the engine tone settle into something smooth again. She nodded once, satisfied. Then she released her grip and walked back toward first class. Not rushed, not dramatic, just certain. As she passed through business class, conversations started again, but different this time. Quieter, more aware. A man in seat 3A leaned toward his companion. She knew, he said softly. She knew he'd handle it. His companion nodded. "Yeah," she said. She trusted him. Trust, not control, not dominance. The word lingered. Emily reached the front of the cabin. Ryan didn't look up. He didn't dare. Lily stood near the galley, her posture straighter now, her movements more deliberate, the earlier fear replaced by something steadier. Not confidence, but direction. Emily stepped into the space between them, looked once at Ryan, then at Lily, then toward the cockpit. Everything in motion. Everything aligned. She turned slightly, her gaze drifting back through the length of the aircraft, all the way to row 42, where Jonathan Reed sat. Still, silent, no longer trying to stand, no longer trying to take control. Just sitting. Emily held that image for a moment. Then she turned away. Because the lesson wasn't finished. Not yet. But the moment that mattered had already passed. The moment where power had been tested and proven, not by force, not by volume, but by knowing exactly when to act and when not to. The descent began under a sky the color of steel. Clouds pressed low over London, thick and heavy, swallowing the horizon in a dull grey haze. The aircraft sliced through them with a steady hum, wings trembling slightly as the air shifted around the fuselage. Inside, the cabin had gone quiet again. Not the tense silence from before. Something else. A quieter awareness. People were watching more carefully now. Not just the front of the plane, but everything. The way the crew moved, the way voices carried, the way authority felt different. Jonathan Reed felt it the most. He sat in row 42, shoulders still pressed tightly between two strangers, his legs stiff, his body aching from hours of forced stillness. The plastic cup sat empty in his hand, fingers still wrapped around it long after the last sip. He hadn't spoken in over an hour. Not to Walter. Not to anyone. Because every time he tried to form a thought, it ran into the same wall. Irrelevance. Up front, Daniel's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into Heathrow. Weather conditions are moderate, visibility limited due to cloud cover. We expect a smooth approach. Smooth." Reed closed his eyes briefly. He knew that tone, the one that calmed people without giving them too much. Daniel had learned, or maybe he had always known. Reed just never saw it. The aircraft tilted slightly. Flaps extended. A low, mechanical whir echoed through the wings. Reed felt it in his chest. Familiar. Too familiar. His fingers tightened slightly around the empty cup. He imagined the cockpit, the sequence, the timing. Too early and you drag too much. Too late and you risk instability. He would have corrected that. He always corrected that. Except now, he wasn't there. And the plane was still flying. Still descending. Still fine. Walter glanced at him again. "You look like you're about to grade someone's driving test," he said, half amused. Reed didn't answer. Walter shrugged and went back to staring out the small oval window, watching nothing but grey. In first class, Emily stood near the galley, speaking quietly with Lily. "After we land," Emily said, her tone calm but firm, "you're off duty." Lily blinked. "Ma'am?" "You're taking 3 days," Emily continued. "Paid. I want a full report. Everything you've experienced working under him. Every incident. Every detail." Lily hesitated. Fear flickered across her face. Not of Emily. Of what came next. He's connected," she said quietly. "He knows people." "The union?" Emily shook her head once. "He doesn't decide your future anymore." The word settled into Lily's chest like something solid, something she could stand on. "You followed protocol," Emily added. "You tried to stop an unsafe situation. That's your job. That's what this company should protect." Lily swallowed, nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Emily reached into her bag and handed her a card. Simple. Black. Clean. "Call this number when you land," she said. "Direct line." Lily took it carefully, like it weighed more than paper should. "Thank you," she whispered. Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. Across the aisle, Ryan Caldwell sat motionless, the weight of everything pressing down on him harder with every passing minute. He had stopped trying to argue, stopped trying to leverage anything. His name. His father. None of it worked here. He looked smaller now. Not physically. Something else. The illusion had cracked, and there was nothing underneath it. The aircraft broke through the cloud layer. Suddenly, the world appeared. Wet runways. Taxiways glistening under dull light. Rows of aircraft lined up like silent observers. London. Reed leaned slightly toward the window. His view was limited, just a narrow slice of grey sky and movement. But it was enough. He watched the flaps adjust again. He felt the landing gear deploy. A heavy thud beneath the cabin. His breath caught. Timing. Always timing. He focused. Even now. Even here. The final approach. The runway lights cut through the haze ahead. Daniel's hands remained steady on the controls. His eyes moved between instruments and horizon, his breathing even, controlled. No hesitation, no overcorrection, just execution. The aircraft descended, lower, closer. Reed's body leaned slightly forward, unconsciously, as if proximity alone might reconnect him to the process. The wheels touched, soft, almost imperceptible. Then the reverse thrust roared, engines pushing back against the momentum, slowing the massive body of the plane with controlled force. Walter clapped once, loud and genuine. "Now that's what I call a landing," he said, nodding to himself. Reed didn't move, didn't react, because there was nothing left to critique. Nothing to correct. It had been perfect. The plane taxied slowly toward the gate. The familiar rhythm of arrival began. Seatbelts unclicked. Overhead bins opened. Voices rose. People reaching, stretching, reclaiming space. But Reed stayed seated, because for the first time in decades, there was nowhere for him to go. Up front, Emily stood near the exit, waiting, not rushing, not blending into the movement, just there. By the time Reed reached the front of the aircraft, the cabin had emptied. The noise faded behind him. The energy shifted again, from crowded to controlled, from movement to stillness. And then he saw them, 2 officers, standing just outside the aircraft door. London Metropolitan Police, uniforms sharp, posture rigid. Between them stood a woman in a tailored suit, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. And Emily. No hoodie now, no casual disguise. A black blazer, structured, precise, authority visible, undeniable. Reed stopped, just short of the threshold. His throat tightened. "Am I under arrest?" he asked. The words came out quieter than he expected. Emily shook her head. "No." She stepped slightly to the side, allowing his view to shift. "The officers are here for Mr. Caldwell," she said. "Assault on a crew member. We're pressing charges." Behind Reed, Ryan froze. The last thread snapped. Reed swallowed. His eyes shifted to the woman with the clipboard. "And her?" he asked. Emily didn't look at the woman. She looked at Reed. "She's here for you." The air changed. Again. Subtly. But completely. "Your credentials," Emily continued. "Badge, clearance. Company-issued devices." Reed stared at her. The words didn't register at first. Then they did. All at once. "You're removing me," he said. Emily tilted her head slightly. "I'm placing you on indefinite administrative leave pending investigation," she said. "Gross misconduct, endangerment, violation of company ethics." Each word landed with precision, measured, deliberate. Reed's grip tightened on his flight bag. "That's 30 years, he said. Emily didn't blink. "Then you should have protected it better." Silence stretched between them. Heavy, final. The woman with the clipboard stepped forward, hand extended. "Your badge, Captain." Reed looked down at the small piece of metal clipped to his chest, the symbol, the identity. He reached for it. Slowly. Unclipped it. Placed it in her hand. "And the stripes," Emily said. Reed froze. His eyes lifted. "Excuse me?" "The epaulets," she said, her voice steady. "You don't wear those off this aircraft." The words cut deeper than anything before. "Because this was final." Reed's hands trembled slightly as they rose to his shoulders. He hesitated. Just a second. Then he pulled them off. One. Then the other. 4 stripes. Gone. He held them for a moment, then dropped them into the bag. Behind him, the cabin stood empty. Ahead of him, the world waited. But it was no longer his. Not the way it had been. Not ever again. The terminal lights were too bright. Jonathan Reed stepped off the jet bridge and into Heathrow Terminal 3 like a man walking out of his own life. The polished floor reflected everything too clearly. Every movement, every hesitation, every fracture he was still trying to hold together. No one stopped him. No one saluted. No one even looked twice. Just another man in a white shirt, sleeves slightly wrinkled, shoulders bare where rank used to sit. Behind him, the aircraft door closed. A quiet, final sound. Back on the plane, things were moving fast. Ryan Caldwell didn't resist. Not anymore. The moment the officers stepped forward, his bravado collapsed completely. His shoulders sank, his gaze dropped, and whatever version of himself he had been performing disappeared under the weight of consequences he could no longer outrun. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us," one of the officers said, voice calm, practiced. Ryan nodded, didn't argue, didn't speak. As they escorted him off the aircraft, the last of the passengers in the jet bridge turned to look, not with curiosity now, with judgment. Lily stood just inside the doorway, watching. Her hands no longer shook, her posture held. For the first time, she wasn't bracing for impact. She was witnessing resolution. Emily turned away from the door and stepped back into the cabin. Empty now? Quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't come from tension, but from completion. Daniel emerged from the cockpit, headset still hanging loosely around his neck, his expression somewhere between disbelief and quiet relief. "That was," he started, then stopped. There weren't words for it. Emily looked at him, measured, assessing. "You handled the turbulence well," she said. Daniel blinked. "Thank you, Mom." "You didn't overcorrect," she continued. "You trusted your instruments." He nodded. "That's what you're trained to do." Emily studied him for a moment longer. Not just what he had done, but how he had done it. Calm, controlled, without ego. "Good," she said. Then after a beat, "How would you feel about taking on more responsibility?" Daniel hesitated. "Out of understanding." "Depends what you mean," he said carefully. Emily's gaze didn't waver. "I mean leadership," she said. "Not just flying the aircraft. Shaping the people who do." The weight of that landed slower, deeper. Daniel exhaled. "That's a lot." Emily nodded. "It is." Silence stretched between them. Then Daniel straightened slightly. "I'd do my best," he said. That was enough. Emily gave a small nod. "I expect nothing less." Back in the terminal, Jonathan Reed walked without direction. Past shops, past gates, past people who had places to be and reasons to move. He had neither. His reflection followed him in the glass panels lining the corridor. A man he recognized, and didn't. He stopped near a window overlooking the tarmac. Rain streaked across the glass, distorting the view of aircraft taxiing in the distance. For a moment, he just stood there, watching. Not as a pilot, as a bystander. He saw one of Vanguardia's aircraft move slowly across the runway, the logo on the tail unmistakable. His airline. Not anymore. A ground vehicle passed in the foreground. A shuttle bus. Slow, routine, invisible. Reed's eyes followed it for a moment longer than necessary, then drifted back to the aircraft. Upstairs, in a quiet conference room overlooking the terminal, Emily sat across from a small group of executives who had arrived on short notice. Legal, operations, human resources. No wasted time. No severance, she said, sliding a file across the table. Administrative leave, pending full investigation. I want every complaint reviewed. Every incident documented. A man in his late 50s adjusted his glasses, flipping through the pages. There are a lot, he said carefully. Emily didn't react. I know. Another executive leaned forward. If this goes public, it already has, Emily said. She tapped her phone once. The screen lit up. A video. Grainy, but clear enough. Ryan Caldwell shouting, Lily backing away, Reed stepping in. Not to protect her, to silence her. The audio cut through the room like a blade. Someone like you doesn't belong here. No one spoke. The silence that followed wasn't uncertainty. It was recognition. This isn't just about one flight, Emily said. It's about a culture that allowed this to happen. She leaned back slightly. And that ends now. Back in the aircraft, Lily moved slowly through the cabin, checking seats, gathering forgotten items, resetting the space for the next flight. Routine, but different now. Every movement felt, seen, supported. She paused at seat 1A, ran her hand lightly over the armrest, then moved on. No hesitation, no fear. In row 42, the seat sat empty. Just another seat. But not really. Not anymore. Hours later, as the aircraft prepared for its next departure, a new crew boarded. Different faces, different energy. Daniel stood at the cockpit door, greeting each member as they passed. Not as a formality, as acknowledgement. Each one mattered. Each one seen. Emily watched from a distance. Quiet, observing. The system resetting. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Outside, the rain continued, steady, unrelenting. But inside the aircraft, something had shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. And somewhere in the vast machinery of the company, that shift began to ripple outward. Because what happened on one flight doesn't stay on that flight. It becomes story, then signal, then change. And Emily Carter had no intention of letting that change stop here. 6 months changed everything. Not the aircraft, not the routes, not the logo painted on the tail. The same Boeing 777 still cut through the sky between New York and London. Engines roaring with the same power, wings flexing against the same invisible currents. From the outside, nothing looked different. But inside, the soul of the airline had been rebuilt. It started quietly. Policy changes no one outside the company noticed. Zero tolerance for abuse. Not from passengers, not from crew, no exceptions. No quiet dismissals labeled as personality conflicts. Every report documented, every incident reviewed. And for the first time in years, people believed something would actually happen when they spoke. Ground staff saw it first. Schedules adjusted. Staffing restored. Breaks respected. Then cabin crew. Training rewritten. Authority clarified. No more guessing whether safety came before status. It did. Always. And in the cockpit, something even more important shifted. Leadership. Daniel Brooks stood at the flight deck door, greeting passengers as they boarded Flight 902. Captain Brooks now. The title still felt new, but it fit. Not because he demanded it, because he earned it. His voice carried differently. Not louder, clearer. Passengers nodded as they passed him. Not out of fear, out of trust. Behind him, the cockpit was organized, calm, precise. Checklists ready. Systems aligned. No tension in the air. Just focus. Lily moved through the cabin with a confidence that hadn't existed 6 months ago. Her uniform crisp, her posture steady. A small gold pin rested near her collar. Purser. Lead cabin. She greeted each passenger with a warmth that felt real, not forced, her eyes meeting theirs without hesitation. She no longer scanned the aisle for threats. She owned it. A man in business class raised his voice slightly when his drink wasn't what he expected. Lily didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She stepped closer, calm, professional. "I'm happy to fix that for you," she said, her tone even. "But I need you to lower your voice." The man paused. Something in her delivery. Firm, respectful, unmovable. He nodded, quieted. And just like that, the moment passed. No escalation, no fear, just boundaries. Up front, seat 1A was occupied, but not by a senator's son, not by a celebrity. Walter Henderson adjusted his seat slightly, still not fully used to the space around him. He wore the same simple jacket, the same gentle expression, his hands resting carefully on the armrests, as if he still expected someone to tell him he didn't belong. A glass of champagne sat in front of him, perfectly chilled. He lifted it slowly, studying the bubbles like they might disappear if he moved too fast. Across the aisle, a woman smiled at him. "First time up here?" she asked. Walter chuckled softly. "Feels like it," he said. He didn't mention the letter. The black envelope that had arrived at his home 2 months ago. Lifetime access. Unlimited travel. No conditions. No explanation beyond a single line. "Thank you for reminding me who matters." Walter didn't fully understand it, but he accepted it. Because sometimes kindness comes back in ways you don't question. In row 42, the seat remained empty. No one assigned. Not today. Not on this flight. A quiet reminder. Not for passengers. For the company. A space that once held a lesson no one wanted to forget. At cruising altitude, Emily Carter sat there. Not in first class, not in 1A. Seat 42B middle, her laptop open. Documents spread across the screen, reports, data, decisions. She typed steadily, the glow of the screen reflecting in her eyes. Every few minutes, she glanced up, watched the cabin, listened. Not as a passenger, as someone responsible. She noticed everything. The way Lily handled tension. The way Daniel communicated with the crew. The way passengers relaxed into the flight. This was the airline. Not the luxury, not the branding. The people, the system, the culture. She leaned back slightly, closing her laptop for a moment. Looked around, listened to the engines. Steady, consistent, reliable, like they should be. Far below, the Atlantic stretched endlessly, a dark, shifting mirror beneath the aircraft. And somewhere on the ground, in a different part of the world, Jonathan Reed sat behind the wheel of a shuttle bus. The heater barely worked, the seats worn, passengers stepping in and out without looking at him twice. He gripped the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead. No uniform, no stripes, no authority. Just routine. The bus stopped. Doors opened. Closed. Moved again. He caught a glimpse of the sky through the windshield. A plane passed overhead. Small. Distant. But unmistakable. He watched it for a second longer than necessary, then returned his focus to the road. Because that was all there was now, and maybe that was what it should have been all along. Back in the air, Emily opened her laptop again. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before she began typing. Not just reports, plans, future routes, hiring structures, training systems, a blueprint for something better, something that wouldn't rely on one moment or one person, but on a standard, clear, unbreakable. Because justice wasn't about a single fall, it was about what rose after. The engines hummed, the aircraft moved forward, and for the first time in a long time, everything inside it felt aligned. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe for more, and drop 3 words in the comments. Respect over power.